How we produce our food, that's one of the biggest challenges we're facing. And right at the heart of that challenge is this fundamental biological process, animal growth. If we really want to understand our food system, we first have to get a grip on the incredible science that makes it all tick.
It kind of seems like magic, doesn't it? But that journey from a newborn to a full-grown animal isn't magic at all. It's this incredibly precise biological dance, a process that science has spent centuries trying to understand and, well, optimize.
So, when you strip it all down, all animal growth really boils down to two things happening at the cellular level. First, you've got hyperplasia. That's just a fancy word for making more cells. This is what's going on like crazy during fetal development. Then, after birth, the main event is hypertrophy, where those existing cells just get bigger. So first, more cells, then bigger cells. That's the core mechanism right there. Simple, right?
Okay, so if that's how animals grow, what decides the limit? What sets the ceiling on how big they can get? Well, that's all written down before they're even born. It's in their DNA. It's the genetic blueprint, the master plan that dictates everything that's going to happen next.
And just take a look at this. It shows you just how different that blueprint can be. On the one hand, you have a Holstein Friesian, a classic dairy cow. On the other, a beef breed like a Hereford. Now, their final weights might look pretty similar on paper, but their genetics have laid out completely different paths for them. One is optimized for milk production, while the other's entire genetic code is geared toward efficiently putting on muscle, what we call protein deposition.
So, if genetics are the blueprint, you can think of hormones as the on-site construction managers. They're the ones reading the plans and shouting out the orders. You've got growth hormone, that's your main accelerator, hitting the gas pedal. IGF-1 is its key messenger, running around and making sure those growth orders are carried out. Then you have androgens like testosterone, which directly tell the muscle cells to start building more protein. And then there's myostatin, and this one is absolutely crucial. It's the brake. It's the manager that tells the muscles when to stop growing.
And this is where it gets really wild. This is the perfect example of just how powerful these hormonal signals are. In Belgian blue cattle, there's a natural genetic mutation that basically just removes the myostatin brake. It's gone. And the result? Muscle growth just goes unchecked, leading to that incredible double-muscled physique. It just shows you how a tiny change in that hormonal control system can have a massive, visible impact.
Okay, so you've got your genetic blueprint and your hormonal managers are on the job. But, you can have the best plans in the world for a skyscraper, but you can't build it without steel and concrete. It's the exact same idea for a growing animal. It needs fuel and the right working conditions, and that's where nutrition and the environment come into play.
And this right here, this is the classic growth curve. It's called a sigmoid curve, and pretty much every animal follows this S-shaped pattern. See how it starts off kind of slow, then whoosh, it hits this rapid acceleration phase where growth is just explosive. And then finally, it starts to slow down and level off as the animal gets closer to its genetically determined mature size.
Now, this chart shows the exact same thing, but we're looking at it from a different angle. We're looking at the speed or the velocity of that growth, and you can see that peak clear as day. That's the point of maximum growth rate. For anyone raising animals for meat, that peak, that's the money spot. The whole goal of efficient production is to maximize that early rapid growth period, because that's when the animal is a super efficient machine turning feed into muscle. Getting that right has huge economic and environmental implications.
So, what is the fuel for all this explosive growth? Well, this quote absolutely nails it. It comes down to protein. More specifically, it's about the essential amino acids you find in their feed. These are literally the building blocks for all that new muscle tissue. You can have the best genetics in the world, but without that high-quality protein, that growth curve we just saw is going to fall flat.
And it's not just about the feed either. Any kind of external stress can just slam the brakes on growth. If an animal's too hot or too cold, it's burning precious energy just to stay comfortable. If it gets sick, its body diverts all those nutrients to fight the infection. All of these things take resources and energy away from the number one job, growing.
So we have the blueprint, the managers, and the fuel. The entire story of modern agriculture is really about how we've learned to understand and then influence each of these components to make food production more efficient.
And you can see this clear evolution over time, right? It all started centuries ago with the most basic thing you can do, selective breeding. Farmers just picked the biggest and fastest growing animals and made them parents. Simple. Then in the 20th century, the science of nutrition exploded. And much more recently, we've developed some really advanced tools like growth promotants and even recombinant DNA tech to tweak growth right at the molecular level.
And the results of just focusing on that genetic blueprint can be absolutely mind-blowing. The modern broiler chicken is the perfect example. After decades of really intensive genetic selection just for growth rate, we now have a bird that gets to market weight in just a fraction of the time it took only 50 years ago. It's a dramatic change.
Now for a more modern way we can influence those hormonal managers, let's look at something called recombinant bovine somatotropin, or RBST. That word recombinant just means it's made in a lab using genetic technology. It's basically a synthetic copy of a cow's natural growth hormone. When it's given to dairy cows, it can boost milk production by about 10 to 15%. And this is where you see different parts of the world taking different approaches. It's approved for use in the US, for example, but it's banned in other places like the EU and Canada.
So all of this science, we're talking genetics, nutrition, biochemistry, it all brings us to right now. We have this incredible, deep understanding of how to grow animals. And that knowledge, well, it forces us to think pretty hard about how we're going to use it going forward.
So let's just boil it all down. We've seen that there are really three main levers we can pull to influence animal growth. First, you've got the genetic blueprint, which sets the absolute potential. Second, there are the hormonal managers, the ones directing the whole project. And third, you have the fuel, the nutrition and the environment that actually let that potential become a reality.
And that leaves us with a huge critical question. This science has given us some incredibly powerful tools. But as we look to a future with billions more people to feed on a planet with limited resources, the challenge isn't just about what's possible anymore. It's about what's responsible. How we choose to balance these levers, that's what will define the future of our food.